Some moments don't arrive with a warning. They simply appear quietly, and before you know it, they settle deep in your chest. This was one of those moments. When Paul Sinha shared this deeply emotional farewell, it wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was powerful enough to leave people completely still. Paul has always been more than a quiz genius. To fans, he's familiarity, comfort, the clever voice that makes you smile even when the questions fly past your head. He's the kind of presence that feels reassuring, like a favorite book you return to again and again, not because it surprises you, but because it understands you. That's why this moment felt so hard to watch. There was a softness in his expression, a careful choice of words that suggested reflection rather than sadness. This wasn't about endings, it was about acknowledgement, about pausing long enough to appreciate a journey that mattered. And that pause made all the difference. Paul spoke not as a performer, but as a person, someone aware of how much connection had grown over time. Someone who understood that shared laughter, shared curiosity, and shared moments create bonds stronger than people often realize. His voice carried warmth and just enough humor to remind everyone that even emotional goodbyes don't need to lose their light. And yes, there was humor, because that's who Paul is. A gentle joke slipped in at just the right moment, easing the weight in the room. The kind of humor that doesn't distract from emotion, but sits beside it, holding its hand. Fans smiled through their feelings, grateful for that familiar spark. What made this farewell so touching was how personal it felt without being private. Paul didn't overshare, he didn't dramatize, he simply spoke with honesty. Gratitude flowed through his words, not just for the experience, but for the people who had shared it with him, from colleagues to viewers at home. There's something incredibly romantic about gratitude. Not romance in the traditional sense, but the romance of appreciation, of recognizing that moments matter because they're shared. Paul's farewell carried that kind of romance, the kind that honors connection rather than spectacle. Fans felt it instantly. Messages poured in from people who had watched him during family dinners, quiet evenings, and long days that needed a little brightness. Some joked about never getting a question right, but always enjoying the ride. Others admitted they hadn't expected to feel emotional, yet found themselves unexpectedly moved. And that's the magic of sincerity. It sneaks up on you. Paul's words reminded everyone that life doesn't move in straight lines, that chapters change even when the story is still beautiful, and that saying goodbye to one version of yourself can be just as meaningful as welcoming the next. There was no fear in his tone, no regret, just reflection. The kind that comes from knowing you gave something your best, laughed along the way, and left with your heart intact. That confidence was comforting. It told fans that whatever came next would be faced with the same wit and intelligence they'd always admired. What made it so hard to watch wasn't sadness, it was recognition. Everyone knows that feeling, standing at the edge of change, looking back with affection while stepping forward with uncertainty. Paul put that feeling into words without ever naming it. And somehow, that made people feel less alone. The atmosphere around the farewell wasn't heavy, it was tender, like the final moments of a great conversation when neither person wants to be the first to leave. You linger, you smile, you say just one more thing. That's what this moment felt like. Paul didn't position himself as the center of attention. Instead, he lifted others up. He thanked, he acknowledged, he appreciated. That humility only deepened the respect fans already had for him. There's something quietly exciting about watching someone embrace change with grace. It reminds us that growth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it arrives with a smile and a thoughtful pause. And through it all, Paul remained unmistakably himself, intelligent, self-aware, warm. Even in a moment filled with emotion, he never lost that spark that made people fall in love with his presence in the first place. Fans didn't just react, they reflected. Many shared stories of transitions in their own lives, jobs left behind, new paths chosen, moments where saying goodbye didn't mean closing a door, but opening a different one. Paul's farewell became a mirror for those experiences. That's when you know a moment matters, not when it trends, but when it connects. There was also joy hidden within the emotion. Joy for what had been accomplished, joy for memories created, joy for knowing that nothing meaningful is ever truly lost. It simply changes form. Paul's farewell wasn't about stepping away, it was about stepping forward, carrying everything learned along the way. And that message resonated deeply. It reminded viewers that it's okay to feel emotional about good things, that gratitude can bring tears just as easily as sadness, and that sometimes the most powerful moments are the ones that make you feel everything at once. As the moment passed, it didn't leave behind emptiness, it left behind appreciation, the kind that stays with you, the kind that makes you smile later, remembering not just what was said, but how it made you feel. And maybe that's why this farewell felt unforgettable, because it wasn't about loss, it was about legacy, about impact, about the quiet influence one person can have simply by being authentic. If this moment moved you, let it remind you to say thank you more often, to laugh when things feel heavy, to recognize when a chapter deserves acknowledgement before turning the page. Because farewells like this aren't meant to make us sad, they're meant to make us grateful. And Paul Sinha gave exactly that. A farewell filled with intelligence, humor, warmth, and heart. One that didn't end a story, but honored it. Some moments are hard to watch, not because they hurt, but because they matter. And this one truly did.